As you probably know, people in Northern Ireland tend to take the issue of identity quite seriously. And when I say quite seriously, I mean extremely, incredibly seriously. In fact, we take the issue of identity so seriously, sometimes it's not funny. The two main identities in Northern Ireland are, of course, British or Irish identities, firmly, sometimes aggressively held. Identities defined at birth and maintained by religion and politics. In Northern Ireland, the question, what are ye, is not an innocent query about your career path or indeed your sexuality. It is instead the query that enables us to define each other completely. And even if you don't want to take part in this game, others will insist on doing it for you.
You play golf? Do you play British or Irish golf?
Being from Northern Ireland, you have a connection to, both you have a connection to Ireland and you have a connection to the, to the UK. Whatever decision I make, it's, whether that's, play for Ireland, play for Britain, not play at all maybe, just because I don't want to upset too many people.
Honestly, if he didn't earn 31 grand a day from his sponsors alone, you'd almost feel sorry for him.
Maybe identity is not black and white. Maybe it's more complicated. Perhaps we need to dig deeper to find out who we really are.
I know all about British and Irish identities because, well, they're on the news quite a lot. I want to find out about an identity about which I know virtually nothing. Ulster Scots. You see, I have a theory. Ulster Scots is perceived as belonging just to one side of the community. And my theory is that most of the perceptions we have in Northern Ireland are completely wrong. So I want to find out if there's anything in this Ulster Scots thing for me, Tim McGarry, lapsed papist. So I'm going on a journey. Why? Well, it's television. If you bake a bun or dance on ice for 2 minutes, you have to go on a journey. I'll be taking a look at the close historical links between Ulster and Scotland. I'll dip a toe into the Ulster Scots language and I'll research my own family roots to find out if there's any Ulster Scots in me. This is Torhead, and over there is Scotland. On a good day, you can see them eating porridge and deep frying their Mars bars. Now, you can't see England from any part of Ireland, but you can see Scotland. And if we can see them, they can see us. For many centuries, long before the first plantation in the 1600s, there was a very close connection between Ulster and Scotland. Indeed, it is believed that the very first settlers who ever came to Ireland came via Scotland during the Mesolithic period, during the Ice Age. They came via the landmass caused by the ice and settled in Ireland round about 8000 BC. And where did they first decide to settle? Where else would you go but Larne?
I'm not going to slag off Larne. I like Larne. One year I actually switched on the Christmas tree lights. Well, I say lights. But why did the first settlers to come here head straight to Larne?
People came because it had a good natural resource of flint.
What's so important about flint?
Flint is a really important piece of stone that can be used to make tools. Essential plate of tool, a knife or a blade.
A knife?
For slicing things.
Slice your bread with that?
Yeah, it feels quite sharp still.
No, it is. It's quite tough, isn't it?
It is.
They didn't have steel in those days.
No, it was called the Stone Age because everything was made of stone.
And this stuff gave a name to the type of stone. Is Larnian?
The age is Larnian.
The age.
Yeah, so a period of time.
Larne, you've got a whole age named after you. What more do you want?
We don't know much about pre-Christian Ireland because, well, people didn't write much down in those days. And the Romans who did write stuff down didn't want anything to do with us. Ireland was the only part of Western Europe that the Romans didn't invade and occupy. Though they did give Ireland its ancient name, Hibernia, land of winter, which suggests that the Romans did actually make it here, but made the mistake of landing in Portrush in July.
In the 1st century AD, the Roman commander Agricola contemplated invading Ireland. He probably looked out from over there and went, I can take this place. In fact, he calculated it would only take 1 legion to conquer Ireland. But then, for some reason, he thought better of it. I reckon he probably looked over and saw us fighting over a flag and said, nah, I tell you what, just leave. There's never been a series of Who Do You Think You Are done in Northern Ireland. That's because here would have to be, who do you think you are? Or else,
think you are something, do ye? Yes, that's the typical Northern Ireland sceptical attitude. But it is always worthwhile looking into your family roots. You never know what you'll find. And if you do want to research your family background, the place you have to go is the Ulster Historical Foundation. And that's where I'm going right now. Well, 5 minutes time. 10 minutes tops.
So, Tim McGarry's Ulster Scots journey. Could I, Tim McGarry, be an Ulster Scot? Well, I know I have a lot of relatives up in Resharkin and they sound like Ulster Scots, but I've come to the Ulster Historical Foundation and Gillian is very kindly helping look into my roots to see how far I go back. Now, the only relations I really know go back as far as my great-grandfather who came from Resharkin. I think you've told me about his name is Patrick McGarry, but that's about as much as I know. Have you found anything else?
Yes, we found Patrick and his wife and family living in Resharkin 100 years ago in the 1901 and the 1911 census. So they were both school teachers at that stage.
School teachers? Boring. Nothing more exciting.
Well, we'll see. They were both living in Resharkin at that stage, but the census tells us that actually Patrick's wife Mary came from County Down. And that would have been quite common. If you were a school teacher, you did move about the country quite a lot for work. And then we were able to find a copy of their marriage record.
So what was her maiden name?
So she was Mary Ann Cleland when she married in 1888.
Is Cleland a significant name in any way?
It's a Scottish name.
So we've only gone back a few generations and it looks like I could have Ulster Scots roots or Ulster Scots connections. Thank God for that, otherwise the programme would have been ruined.
We started looking for any Mary Ann Clelands we could find whose father was called James in that period in County Down. We knew she was 22 when she married in 1888, so we knew she was born around 1866. So we found this birth certificate. So this is Mary Ann and she's born on the 18th of November 1865 in Nuns Quarter, a townland called Nuns Quarter.
Nuns Quarter. How ironic. She's very Catholic, very religious woman. Nuns Quarter is where?
It's on the Odds Peninsula, just north of Cucubbin. You have Nuns Quarter and then beside it in Innishowen.
So, my great-great-grandmother came from here, Nuns Quarter. Now, I'm not sure if she came from downtown Nuns Quarter or the lower east side of Nuns Quarter, you know, the bad side of town. Well, I say town.
So after the Romans decided not to invade Ireland, the Irish decided to invade bits of Scotland. In fact, that's where the name Scotland comes from. Scotty was the name Roman writers gave to Irish raiders and bandits who attacked Roman Britain, and the name stuck.
So Scotland was named after a bunch of Irish people. For centuries there's been a very close connection between Scotland and Ulster. For hundreds and hundreds of years there'd been invasion, counter-invasion, raids, immigration, intermarriage, settlements. One man has a theory about one emigrant from Scotland to Ireland.
There are a number of ancient churches in Scotland which claim to have been founded by Patrick.
So St Patrick came from Scotland to Donaghadee?
I know some folk in Donaghadee today who could take you down there at low tide and show you a rock which tradition claims bears the marks of his feet and also of his horse's hooves.
Forget New York, we could have the massive St Patrick's Day parade here in Donaghadee.
Why not?
I think that would work. St Patrick Scottish? Suppose it could have been worse, he could have been English. Of course, the influence of St Patrick can't be underestimated. Within a few decades, all of Ireland had been converted to Christianity, and shortly afterwards, monasteries and abbeys were founded all over the country and became centres of great learning in Dark Ages Europe. Did you know that Bangor Abbey, for instance, was known as the light of the world? And yes, I do mean Picky Pool, Gravy Chip, Bangor. And then there's this famous abbey at Nendrum, just outside Cumber. It's a fine example of what these abbeys and monasteries would have looked like. Nendrum has the oldest tide mill in the world, and it also has this, a very famous sundial, which the monks were able to use once, sometimes twice a year. So, we gave the Scots their name, and they gave us St Patrick. But that's not all, because it is accepted that the very first King of Scotland was a man by the name of Fergus More, or Fergus the Great. And where was he from? Here, County Antrim, Dunseverick, just a couple of miles down from the Giant's Causeway. And in the 5th century AD, Fergus the Great led an expedition to Scotland, to Kintyre and Argyll, and there he set up the great Scottish kingdom of Dalriada.
King Fergus is crowned the king of a joint kingdom in the early 6th century. He goes across from Dunseverick, he goes to Dunad, he takes some of his family with him, probably takes some retainers with him, but what he doesn't take with him is an army. So he's not going to conquer territory, he's going to regularise a settlement that's already there, obviously.
Nowadays, all kings and queens of Scotland have to claim some descent from Fergus the Great. Yes, that's right, folks. Queen Elizabeth II has a little bit, not very much to be honest, but a little bit of County Antrim in her. According to an old Scots chronicle, in the year 503 AD, King Fergus had a skin problem. Well, they just didn't moisturise in those days. Mind you, there isn't a cleanser in the world that can save you from leprosy. So in order to cure his leprosy, King Fergus decided to visit a very famous healing well. Sadly, the cure didn't work, partly because he didn't get there, when his ship hit a rock and he drowned. Mind you, it wasn't just any old rock, it's the rock upon which Carrickfergus Castle now stands. Indeed, Fergus's death gives its name to this very place. It is the Carrick or Rock of Fergus, Carrickfergus. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a television exclusive to the Tim McGarry Ulster Scots journey. For the first time ever, we are filming the grave of Fergus Moore, the first King of Scotland. Yes, his last resting place is around here in a farmer's field just outside Monkstown. For centuries, Irish and Scots pilgrims came here to Monkstown Abbey to pay their last respects to the great Fergus Moore. But as you know, times change and the building, well, it's a wee bit neglected now. So if Her Majesty the Queen is watching, and I see no reason why she wouldn't be once the horse racing's over, Liz, your ancestor is buried round here. Please, give us a few quid. We'll put a sign up. Tidy the place up. So the kingdom of Dalriada could afford to be pretty smug about itself. In the 6th and 7th centuries, the kingdom covered Antrim, Down and most of the west of Scotland. And why was it so successful? Well, because it had quick and easy sea transport. Of course, there's always a downside. And the downside to quick and easy sea transport was, well, the Vikings. Now, Vikings don't have a great image. They're always seen as marauders and pillagers, only interested in plunder, a bit like modern-day bankers. So when they came to Ireland, well, they did destroy a bit. They destroyed Bangor and this monastery here at Antrim. I mean, just look what they did to that round tower there.
The Vikings spelt the end of Dalriada, but like all invaders, they liked the look of the place, so they intermingled with the Irish, intermarried and settled. So did the next lot, but who were they?
The next invaders of Ireland didn't come via Scotland. They were the Normans. The Normans first arrived in Ireland in the year 1169 after they were invited in. But you know what it's like, invite somebody into your house, they never go home. The Normans first landed in southern Ireland, but one band of them, led by John de Courcy, headed north to see what was available.
Actually, he didn't have 1,000 men, he only had a few dozen, but that was enough to take Ulster. And to prove he was not a man to be messed with, he built this, Carrickfergus Castle.
Nothing like that had ever been seen at the time. The walls are 90 feet high, they're 3 to 4 feet thick. It's a statement of power, it's a statement of status, a statement that the Normans are here to come. Carrickfergus was the centre of the area that the Normans conquered in Ulster.
It looked like the Normans were going to be able to conquer all of Ireland fairly easily, but one thing stood in their way. What was it? You guessed it, the Scots. Have you seen the film Braveheart? Mel Gibson as William Wallace leading the first Scottish rebellion against the English. I really like it. One reviewer didn't like it. One reviewer said the dates aren't accurate, the names aren't accurate, the events aren't accurate, the clothes aren't accurate. Billy Connolly didn't like it either. He described it as a piece of pure Australian shite. All right, fair enough, it is a little bit inaccurate. In fact, the name Braveheart is wrong. Braveheart didn't refer to William Wallace at all. It referred to his successor in the fight against the English, the very famous Robert the Bruce. And when Robert the Bruce fought the English, he had his ups
and his downs. And one of the down times he had to flee Scotland, and where did he end up? Beautiful Rathlin Island. We all know the story of the cave and the spider. And as Alex Salmond will be reminding you from now until the referendum on Scottish independence, Robert the Bruce won the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314.
Just across the narrow water in Ulster was an English garrison, so Robert the Bruce sent his brother Edward over to deal with them.
In the summer of 1315, he came over to Ulster with 6,000 veterans who had fought at Bannockburn, and then put Carrickfergus, which was the main castle in Ulster, under siege in September 1315.
The siege lasted an entire year. How were they able to hold out?
Well, in the summer of 1316, it looked like the garrison was going to surrender, and 30 Scottish soldiers came to take the surrender of the castle. And instead, the garrison grabbed them, closed the gates again, and said, "We're going to fight on." And it is said that as the food ran out and as the water ran out, they actually ate their 30 Scottish prisoners. Now, whether that's fact or legend, we don't know.
Edward Bruce was eventually defeated in the year 1318 in a battle outside Dundalk. They say his body is buried in a church there. Well, bits of it may be, because he was beheaded and bits of him were sent to the four corners of Ireland. But the effect of Bruce's invasion of Ireland can't be overestimated. After that, British rule in Ireland was shattered, and it would take a long, long time before they ever dominated Ireland again. Dunluce Castle, famous for being on the cover of a Led Zeppelin album. Ask your dad, he'll explain it to you. So, where were we? Yes, the Scots saved the Irish from the English, for a bit. Now, despite what Mel Gibson says, I'm afraid it's not true. Not all Scots were on the side of Robert the Bruce. Some of them lined up with the English.
And Bruce wanted a word with him. And they didn't fancy having a word with him, so they fled to the Glens of Antrim. The MacDonalds were probably the most famous family. They seized lands in the Glens, and their capital was Dunluce.
The problem with the MacDonalds was that they were Scottish and Catholic, which didn't please Queen Elizabeth I, who was Protestant and English, and who saw this place and everybody in it as an affront to her kingdom. So when an English expedition, including Sir Francis Drake, massacred a lot of MacDonalds, including women and children, on Rathlin Island here, the Queen was very pleased. Even more pleased was the Earl of Essex, who reported delightedly that they had killed over 600 people. And even better, according to him, Sorry Boy MacDonald had to watch the massacre helplessly from the coast, perhaps even here where I'm standing. Essex reported that Sorry Boy must have been driven mad with the torment, for there he lost everything he ever had. The Queen was so pleased that she told the executioner she would not be unmindful of his services. Probably give him an OBE.
And then we find that her mother's name was Jane McClelland, and he was an assistant farmer. So again, it all ties in with the information that we have from her marriage record.
Farmer.
An assistant farmer, yes.
What, farmer with an assistant? Never heard of an assistant farmer. Well, that's fine, okay, so this is a great-great-grandfather. Is there anything else significant about this?
The only thing is that his residence was different to where the child was born, and then we looked a little bit more to try and find the marriage record of her parents, and we didn't find any marriage record for that couple.
Whoa, 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 whoa. You're saying my great-great-grandfather and my great-great-grandmother weren't married?
It certainly looks that way, yes.
Really? Excuse me, my great-grandmother was a very highly respected woman in Resharkin and a school teacher, but you're saying she was actually illegitimate?
Yes, it would appear so. We find a marriage record in 1869 for a James Cleland from Inisharga, a farmer, marrying a Margaret Holland in Ballywalter's Second Presbyterian Church.
So he didn't even have the decency to marry her? My great-great-grandmother, possibly illegitimate, and the father didn't marry her? He married somebody else?
No, it appears that he then married someone else a few years later, and then the mother, Jane McClelland, she marries in 1873 in Grey Abbey Roman Catholic Church.
Right, hold on a while. So again, he got married in a Presbyterian church.
Yes.
But she's Catholic.
Was she married in a Roman Catholic church, so it would appear that she was.
This is cross-community smut.
I'm actually genuinely surprised about the revelations about my great-great-grandmother and father, and a little bit pleased, to be honest. Yes, I am at least a bit Ulster Scot, and a wee bit cross-community. I could probably get my own EU peace grant just for myself. And yes, my great-great-grandmother went up the road for a few miles to get a man. She didn't go very far. But to be fair, though, she was very brave to have an illegitimate child and not get married. In 1865, she must have been the talk of the town. Well, I say town. Chichester Street, named after Arthur Chichester. Well, who the hell is he, and why's he got a street named after him, I hear you ask? Well, he was a favourite general of Queen Elizabeth I. The Queen was determined to conquer all of Ireland, but Ulster held out against her. In 1594, the famous Gaelic chieftain Hugh O'Neill rose up in rebellion, starting what was known as the 9 Years' War. The war ended in defeat for the Gaelic chieftains, and as a reward to Arthur Chichester, the Queen gave him a castle and ownership of what we now know as Belfast. So Arthur naturally started to name streets after himself. Well, you would, wouldn't you? So this is Chichester Street. Didn't have as many bus lanes in them days.
Arthur Chichester would have been one of the most important people at the end of the 16th and early 17th century.
There's a bloke kneeling at the bottom. Who's that guy?
That's Sir John Chichester, and he was governor of Carrickfergus in the late 1590s.
He's Arthur's big brother.
Arthur's big brother. John Chichester had a parley with James MacDonald, but instead of bringing small numbers and sitting down and talking sensibly, both sides brought hundreds of men, and a battle broke out. John Chichester was killed, he was decapitated, and it is said that his head was put in a barrel of salt and brought down to Dungannon, where Hugh O'Neill's base was, and that the Irish played football with his head round the camp.
That's not nice. So Arthur was very annoyed about that?
He did bear a grudge, and a year and a bit after John was killed, he became governor of Carrickfergus himself in 1599. He was one of Elizabeth's top generals, fighting the O'Neills and the MacDonalds as well.
The MacDonalds managed to survive, and when King James came to the throne, they curried favour with him by settling more lowland Scots here in the Glens of Antrim. Indeed, Ulster was the last place in Ireland to resist the English conquest. The last hooray for the Gaelic chiefs was the Battle of Kinsale in 1601, and then, of course, the famous Flight of the Earls of 1607. Now, many people think that the first major migration of Scots into Ulster occurred with the Great Plantation, but as we've seen, Scots have been coming to Ulster for hundreds and hundreds of years. And indeed, before the Great Plantation, there was one other major migration of lowland Scots into Ulster. That occurred in 1606, and it all began with a jailbreak and some cheese. The man who escaped was called Con O'Neill. Who he, I hear you cry? Well, Con was the head of the Clandy Boy O'Neills, the Gaelic chieftain who owned South Antrim and most of North Down. For years, the English crown had been trying to relieve Con of his lands, and in the year 1602, they got their chance. What happened was, Con threw a Christmas party. Nothing unusual there, I hear you say. Indeed, by all accounts, it was a jolly good party. According to one contemporary record, it was a grand debauch, a kind of 17th century bunga bunga party. But then, disaster struck. What's the worst thing that could happen at an Irish party? Yep, the drink ran out. Well, Con did what any reasonable Irish person would do. He sent some of his men to rob the nearest wine store in the nearby village of Belfast. Unfortunately, on their way, his men encountered some English troops. A fight ensued. One of the troops was killed. Con was immediately arrested and charged with levying war on the Queen's soldiers. High treason. Of course, nowadays, high treason has a penalty of, well, 100 hours community service. But in those days, the penalty was death. Arthur Chichester, the Lord Deputy of Ireland, very kindly offered to execute Con without the necessity of a trial or anything. He was hoping to see some of Con's lands. Fortunately for Con, Queen Elizabeth I went and died without an heir, which meant the end of the Tudor line and the accession onto the throne of James I. And that was good news because it gave Con's wife an idea. She approached a man by the name of Hugh Montgomery and came with a deal. She said, "Spring my husband Con out of jail, get him a pardon from King James, and I will give you half of Con O'Neill's lands in Ulster." There aren't many cheese-based prison escapes. I love a good prison escape. Normally it's digging tunnels, but there was a man by the name of Con O'Neill managed to escape from prison in Carrickfergus Castle. What's the story behind that?
His wife smuggled in ropes into 2 cheeses, and with those ropes he was able to scale the walls of the castle, and the Montgomerys whisked him off to Scotland.
But another Ayrshire man, James Hamilton, got wind of the plan and he muscled in on the deal.
Hamilton was sent by the King of Scotland to Dublin. He set up a school in Dublin and became a founder of Trinity College, but used his position of influence to get access to the royal correspondence. So all of the mail that was going between Dublin and the royal court in London, Hamilton was getting access to.
So he was just basically a spy who could read this stuff?
He was feeding information back to the King of Scotland. Because the King of Scotland knew the Queen of England had no children and suspected that he was next in line. So he was just gathering information and waiting for the day. And Hamilton was his man. And when the King was asked to authorise the proposed deal between O'Neill and Montgomery, Hamilton's man intervened and said, "See all that land, you can't divide that in 2. Divide it in 3 and give a third of it to Hamilton."
The land that they took, what did they find when they got here?
About 40 years previously, Elizabeth had sent English troops across to try to take County Down by force from the Clandy-boy O'Neills. It didn't work. The O'Neills fought back and fought hard, and in the course of that they burned all of the stone buildings.
But who was physically here? Were people ejected from land? Did you steal my land?
When the Scots arrived, there was, the records say, hardly anybody here at all.
Hamilton's headquarters at Killyleagh seemed to prove to Montgomery that he'd been sold a pup, and Hamilton had ended up with all the best land. Tensions between the 2 men led to Hamilton hiring a map maker, Thomas Raven, to set out exactly who owned what. The beautifully illustrated Raven maps survive today and can be seen in North Down Museum.
Montgomery and Hamilton didn't get on very well, is that right?
They loathed one another, so this map was a way of just determining who owned what land and where those boundaries were.
Right, well, we're looking here at a map of, it says East Hollywood, with somewhere called Ballyderry. We've Knocknagonie up here. For some reason the Tesco isn't there, but I don't know why that is. But if you look at Hollywood, East Hollywood, we have what looks to me like the Maypole.
It is indeed, yeah.
So the Maypole does actually date from the 1600s.
Yeah, and possibly before this. I mean, that just means it was there when they drew this map. It doesn't tell us how long it was there beforehand.
So if I was to stick this book under my arm and run out there and bring it to the Antiques Roadshow, what sort of value would we get for it?
Priceless. Couldn't put a value on it, but we wouldn't let you out the door anyway.
You'd stop me, would you?
Yeah, we'd jump on you.
Well, there's a fellow over there, looks like he would stop me, but yeah, I'd give you a go. So we've just romped through several thousand years of history and discovered how closely our past is linked to that of Scotland. And talking of romps, we've also learned that no matter how respectable you think your family is, there's always some dark secret out there to embarrass you. Yes, my great-grandparents were teachers. The shame. I've also discovered Ulster Scots roots that I didn't know I had just 4 generations back. On the next programme, we'll be looking at the biggest and most controversial influx of Ulster Scots, the plantation.
And Tim continues his Ulster Scots journey next Wednesday at the same time here on BBC One Northern Ireland. Next tonight, it's a question of sport.